What if I told you that a poor carpenter from a tiny village became the most influential person who ever lived, without writing a single book? A man who never ruled an empire, never led an army, and died a criminal's death. Yet 2,000 years later, still changes billions of lives. This is the story of Jesus, the man whose words and sacrifice reshaped the entire course of human history. This narrative follows the remarkable journey of Jesus as recounted in the pages of the New Testament. His vision for spreading divine love took root in the modest circumstances of his birth in a quiet village. Day after day, he devoted himself to uplifting others, offering hope and healing to those who crossed his path. Despite numerous hardships, he remained steadfast in his commitment to a higher purpose. He emerged as one of the most influential teachers the world has ever witnessed. Let us begin at the very start of this extraordinary account. Jesus entered the world in Bethlehem at a time when King Herod held power over the region. His arrival took place in a humble stable, as no lodging was available for his family in the crowded inn. Shepherds keeping watch over their flocks received a heavenly announcement of his birth that night. Travelers from distant lands arrived bearing precious gifts to honor the newborn child. To shield him from imminent threat, his family journeyed to Egypt and remained there until safety returned. Upon their return, they settled in the peaceful town of Nazareth, where he spent his early years. Though his household possessed little in material wealth, they nurtured strong spiritual values in their children. As a young boy, he learned the trade of carpentry from Joseph and grew accustomed to simple labor. At the age of 12, he lingered in the temple in Jerusalem, engaging the scholars with thoughtful questions. Even in childhood, his remarkable insight astonished those who heard him speak. Life in Nazareth unfolded quietly, yet within him burned a growing awareness of his destined path. Around the age of 30, he traveled to the Jordan River to receive baptism from John. As he emerged from the water, the heavens opened and the Spirit descended upon him like a dove. A voice from above declared him the beloved Son, in whom the Father found great delight. Immediately afterward, the Spirit led him into the wilderness, where he fasted for 40 days. There he faced intense temptation from the adversary, but responded each time with words from sacred Scripture. His deep devotion to the divine enabled him to overcome every trial with unwavering integrity. Having triumphed, he returned to Galilee filled with spiritual power and began his public work. He proclaimed that the reign of heaven had drawn near and invited people to embrace a new way of living. Beside the Sea of Galilee, he called ordinary fishermen to leave their nets and join him in a greater calling. Simon Peter, Andrew, James, and John responded without hesitation, forsaking everything to follow him. In time, he gathered 12 close companions whom he trained personally to continue his mission. His compassionate nature drew crowds from every direction seeking guidance and restoration. Each day he poured himself into teaching in synagogues and opened spaces across the countryside. He restored sight to the blind, enabled the lame to walk, and freed many from various afflictions. Tender concern for the suffering moved him to pause and extend help to every person in need. Whenever someone experienced healing, his heart overflowed with quiet joy at their renewed wholeness. Even as he witnessed widespread spiritual hunger, he felt the weight of their lost condition. His intention was to serve as the caring shepherd who gathers and protects the scattered flock. He consistently demonstrated kindness toward those whom society had pushed aside. Observers marveled at the authority with which he spoke and the clarity of his message. Nevertheless, certain religious authorities grew suspicious and began to challenge his authority. Yet he refused to be deterred and continued his work with resolute focus. He conveyed deep truths through vivid stories drawn from everyday life that listeners could easily grasp. Parables about a wandering sheep, a missing coin, and a father's welcoming embrace illustrated divine mercy beautifully. On a hillside, he described the characteristics of those truly blessed in the eyes of heaven. His message emphasized love for others, the power of forgiveness, and the practice of sincere prayer. Crowds listened with growing understanding and found renewed hope in his words. At the same time, he recognized that acceptance would not come easily to everyone. Above all, he desired that people would relate to the divine as a loving and caring parent. Even when exhaustion set in, he pressed on, offering spiritual nourishment to all who gathered. Families brought their afflicted loved ones from far and wide, trusting in his ability to restore them. He remained committed to reaching as many hearts as possible with the message of hope. Remarkable acts of power accompanied his teaching, revealing the presence of divine authority at work. At a wedding feast in Cana, he transformed water into the finest wine, revealing his glory to his followers. On a hillside, he multiplied a few loaves and fish to satisfy a multitude of over 5,000 hungry listeners. During a fierce storm on the lake, he walked across the waves to comfort his frightened disciples. With a simple command, he stilled the raging wind and waves, demonstrating mastery over creation itself. His protective care for his companions shone brightly as he calmed both the elements and their fears. Each demonstration of power served to strengthen their trust and deepen their understanding. He cultivated the habit of seeking solitude for prayer, sometimes continuing through the entire night. Many who witnessed these signs came to place their confidence in him. However, influential leaders felt threatened and began conspiring to silence him. Still, he remained faithful to his calling, refusing to compromise his message. He understood that the road ahead led to Jerusalem, where his mission would reach its climax. With steady resolve, he directed his steps toward the city, fully aware of the suffering that awaited. His willingness to sacrifice everything sprang from a profound love for humanity. Though the burden grew heavier, he continued forward, sustained by the knowledge of a greater purpose. Along the way, he prepared his closest followers for the trials that lay before them. His ultimate expression of love would be the willing surrender of his own life. Upon entering Jerusalem, the crowds greeted him with joyful shouts and spread palm branches in his path. Riding on a donkey, he fulfilled ancient words spoken by the prophets long before. In the temple courts, he drove out those who had turned the sacred space into a marketplace. He declared that the house of prayer must remain open for all people from every nation. During those final days, he continued teaching openly in the temple precincts. His persistence in sharing truth remained undiminished even as opposition intensified. On his last evening, he shared a special meal with the 12 in an upper room. There, he performed the humble act of washing their feet to illustrate the spirit of service. He instituted a new memorial using bread and wine to represent his body and blood given for others. Later that night, in a quiet garden, he prayed with deep anguish, submitting fully to the divine will. Though sorrow pressed upon him, he chose obedience, over escape. His concern extended even to the one who would betray him, addressing him still as friend. Soldiers arrived and led him away to face trial before religious and political authorities. Throughout the proceedings, he maintained a dignified silence in the face of false accusations. Roman officials found no basis for condemnation, yet yielded to the demands of the crowd. He endured mockery, beatings, and finally crucifixion between two criminals on a hill outside the city. Even in his final moments, he extended forgiveness to those who had carried out the sentence. To a repentant man crucified beside him, he offered the promise of paradise that very day. With his last breath, he committed his spirit into the hands of the Father, and the earth grew dark. His body was placed in a new tomb provided by a follower, and a stone sealed the entrance. On the third morning, the tomb stood empty, and he appeared alive to those who had loved him. He showed his wounds to the disciples and shared a meal with them to confirm his physical resurrection. Over the following weeks, he appeared repeatedly, explaining how the ancient writings pointed to these events. Before ascending, he commissioned his followers to carry his message to every nation on earth. As he was taken up into the clouds, two messengers assured the disciples of his eventual return. The small band returned to Jerusalem filled with awe and waited together in prayer. His life demonstrated that sacrificial love possesses power greater than death itself. Through his resurrection, a path opened for anyone to receive forgiveness and eternal hope. His example continues to inspire countless people across centuries to choose compassion over indifference. Those who follow his way discover strength to forgive, courage to serve, and peace that endures through every trial. Thank you for listening to this account drawn from the New Testament. If these words have touched you, consider subscribing and enabling notifications so you never miss another story like this one. See you in the next one.